Lawyers of Reddit, what's the stupidest case you've been asked to take on, and did you? Story 1. I'm a personal injury lawyer in the UK. I took a call from a potential client that had fallen down the stairs in her own home. She had tripped over her own cat. She told me that she wanted to sue her local authority as her home was owned by the council and she was not allowed to keep pets as part of her lease. She claimed that when the house was inspected, she was not told to get rid of the cat. It was therefore the council's fault that she fell down the stairs. We didn't take the case on. Edit, formatting, and some tidying up. Story 2. Not really stupid, but unbelievable. My friend at work, his girlfriend filed for divorce a few weeks ago. That's right. They aren't married, and common law doesn't apply in WA state. They lived together for 5 years. She has a job, she isn't on the mortgage, and she left him a few months ago. There are no kids involved. They were never engaged. In the divorce, she wants him to leave his house and she wants to move back in. She wants him to pay her $2,800 a month for some reason. I referred him to my divorce attorney, and now that attorney is probably going to represent him. The chick is nuts. She's already tried to get a restraining order against him that was dismissed. Story 3. I dealt with a guy once who wanted me to take on his road traffic accident PI claim. He had written a poem in Yoruba about the accident. He refused to tell me anything about his case until he's read the whole thing in Yoruba. Among other problems, I can't speak any fucking Yoruba, as in not one word. As in, that day was the first time I had ever heard of the Yoruba language. I'm not even from a part of the world where I might readily be mistaken for someone who speaks Yoruba. It's a West African language, and I am really obviously not from a West African background. I try to explain this to the guy who becomes very agitated and insists that he must read out his poem in Yoruba. I give up and tell him to get on with it so we can talk about his claim. He does. It takes him nearly 20 minutes to finish. Anyway, after he's done, he finishes and sits back with a big smile and says that he's certain I'll take his case on now. I begin to ask him some questions about his case, but he refuses to answer. He says that this poem, in Yoruba, is everything I need to know about his case. Basically, I tell him to off and stop wasting my time. He does, but not before standing around outside my office for an hour or so, reading out his poem, to no one in particular, over and over again. In Yoruba. Edit. Thanks for the gold, strangers. Story 4. Client wanted to sue because there were no strawberries in her fruit salad which she bought from a supermarket. Thankfully, a secretary was able to screen the call. She asked if the package said it had strawberries, and the response was, no, but I thought it would have. I don't know how these people managed to make it through life. Story 5. Without going into too many details, had a guy that wanted to bring a class action against the company that made his underwear, because he was convinced his underwear was the reason he had a crooked. He assured us that as soon as the jury saw his, they'd side with him. No, we didn't take it. Story 6. A lady once called asking us to sue her neighbors. They were using voodoo on her. Fortunately, she had psychic powers and thus knew what they were doing. I respectfully declined. Story 7. I was working in a law firm and got a call from reception advising that someone had arrived needing some intellectual property advice. I arrived at reception to find a clearly disturbed woman with a persistent facial twitch and a small wheeled suitcase. I took her to a conference room to discuss, making sure I kept a good line of sight to reception. She put the suitcase on the table and opened it to reveal a stack of thousands of handwritten pages and one half of a pair of scissors, so I guess a scissor. She explained that she had written a manuscript about how the city council gave her schizophrenia and hepatitis, aliens stole her pets, and that it was all part of a bigger conspiracy involving the army and the Illuminati. She was worried that our local newspaper was going to steal her thoughts and publish her manuscript without her consent, and wanted to register the copyright in her manuscript. We then had a perfectly rational and reasonable discussion about copyright laws. I explained that in our jurisdiction she didn't need to register it and that she had rights as an author automatically on creation of the work. I told her the most useful thing she could do is ensure she had evidence of her creative work, and that she should send a digital copy to herself and a friend, and also leave a copy with a friend. That way, if it was published without her consent, she could prove it was her work. We spoke for nearly an hour. She thanked me and then left. She got free legal advice and I didn't get stabbed with a scissor. I hope she found the help she needs. Edit. Assumed this would get buried. I was a junior and just tried to treat the client with respect and empathy. Scissor gave me pause, but never felt in danger. Was relieved she had a real legal question and we focused on that rather than her delusions. And in that sense, it wasn't a stupid case. I will say this. As a society, we don't do enough to look after our most vulnerable people, including those with serious mental health issues. Edit 2. Thanks for my first gold, kind stranger. Story 8. I once represented a guy who was denied unemployment benefits after being fired from his job as a mopper at an adult video store for sexual harassment. I won. Edit. As explained down thread, I am almost entirely certain that my client was not the same guy who did the AMA a few months ago. Story 9. My father is a patent attorney. And when I was around 14, he told me about a guy who wanted to patent the iPhone 3 because aliens had given him the design for it. My father told him that if the aliens originally designed, then they were the ones that had to patent it, not him. Story 10. A guy found a rock in the middle of Melbourne CBD that he believed came from an underground volcano. Therefore, he discovered the volcano and he owned the volcano, and that the Melbourne City Council and indeed the Victorian government should pay him rent to live on top of his underground volcano. No, I did not take on the case. Story 11. I run a consumer advocacy firm. I had a client come in and tell me that he bought a product, and the company refused to honor the warranty after the product broke. I asked for details, and he just started screaming in my face, asking if I was going to take his money or not. I decided then that I wasn't taking him on as a client, but I wanted to know what was going on. I convinced him to tell me what happened. Turns out he bought a computer back in the 1990s. It had just recently died, but not because it was old and just stopped working. It was slow, so he picked it up and threw it out a 2-story window. And then he wanted to sue the manufacturer for breaking warranty. Edit. Well, there goes my inbox. Story 12. Lawyer for 12 years. Client was charged with stealing a mobile toilet. After we won, he told me he still owns it. That has the thing in his backyard because he was lazy as his office was nearby. Forced him to deliver it back at night. Jesus. Still offended that he lied to me the whole time. Story 13. My dad is an in-house lawyer for a major American insurance company. He once spent an entire year trying to help deny insurance benefits for a painter who had stepped off his ladder onto a cat, fallen down the stairs, and become paralyzed. The insurance company was arguing that a cat was a commonly expected occupational hazard for a painter, and that he was negligent in not checking for cats before stepping down. A whole year of his life. Over whether a cat is a known occupational hazard of house painting. Story 14. And B, this is pretty graphic, so you might want to skip this one if you don't have a strong stomach. The guy who cut off all of his fingers would be a serious contender. He clearly had some really awful mental illness. I assumed schizophrenia or psychosis, but I never really found out what his deal was. Anyway, he had decided one evening that a good way to get some money would be to break into a butcher's shop and use a meat saw to cut all his fingers and both thumbs off at the knuckles, which is pretty much exactly what he did. He was found the next morning, somehow having survived. He was put in a mental health facility and made a pretty much full, albeit fingerless, recovery. Anyway, he wanted to sue someone. He didn't really know who he wanted to sue. He had just got it into his head that if he was injured, he would get compensation. I remember his biggest question was whether he would get more money if he went back and cut off his feet too. Edit. Lots of people are asking how he managed to cut off the fingers on his second hand. Basically, he used one of these, http://orionequipink.com/wp-content/theme/aquisto/timthumb. PHP, src =http://orionequipink. com/wp content/upload/2012/05/bb20b as 1. JPEG and H = 410 and W = 408 and ZC = 2. The blade in the middle is very sharp and goes up and down. He switched it on, then pushed his fingers and thumbs into it one after the other until they were cut off. Story 15. I never did much criminal defense, but a man who we'll call Dennis came into my office with a driving while intoxicated charge and an aggravated unlicensed operation of a motor vehicle charge. Both misdemeanors. Dennis swore up, down, and sideways that one. He does not drink and was not intoxicated. 2. He never drove the vehicle. And 3. That he has a valid driver's license. I give Dennis the names of some local criminal defense and DWI attorneys and suggest he try them out. Dennis refuses, saying I'm the lawyer he wants. In hindsight, I should have realized that he probably had already gone to these other attorneys and only came to me after they refused to take his case. I charged the guy $200 for an intake and record review fee and contact the local court, police station, and district attorney's office for information and paperwork. I find out that not only did this guy blow A18 on the breathalyzer, but the cops did a blood test on him after he kept insisting he wasn't drunk. The blood test came back with a 22 back. As for driving, the separate squad cars witnessed Dennis's vehicle run over a mailbox and drive off. He was followed and pulled over on the block. Per the police report, Dennis was the only person in the car and was in the driver's seat with a seatbelt on. Oh, and I tracked down his license through the DMV, and it had expired 3 years ago and was suspended for 2 years prior to that. I called Dennis back into my office and told him he did not have a case that should be taken to trial. Dennis admitted that he probably had been drunk, but he wasn't aware he had been drinking. His son must have put Fireball whiskey in his green tea, and he didn't realize there was whiskey in his green tea because he was eating red-hot cinnamon candies and had a cold, stuffy nose. Anyways, Dennis retains me, but only after I put a clause in his engagement agreement stating I explained his low chance at trial, and he understood there was no guarantee of a win. I take the case to trial, and, of course, we lose. I was hoping to convince Dennis to take one of the plea offers given to us in advance, but absolutely not. Dennis was sure the judge would understand. Dennis wanted a bench trial, not a jury trial. I made him sign another document later on that said he understood the difference between a bench and jury trial, and he was opting for the bench trial, and he would be found not guilty and everyone would move on. He was sorely disappointed but only got probation after trial. I think the judge was taking pity on me more than Dennis. Dennis later sued me for his retainer because I didn't adequately defend him. As proof of my inadequate representation, he offered the judge's verdict rendering him guilty. The case was thrown out quickly. Story 16. I'm a lawyer, but this happened to a friend of mine. He got engaged, and apparently this pissed off his ex-GF. The ex-GF sued him for custody of their 2 cats and $500,000 for something like the lost value of the cats because she claimed they were service animals. Hint, they were not at all service animals. Edit. Wow, this got a lot of attention. So to add to the story, one of the reasons my friend broke up with the ex-GF was because she had problems caring for the cats, ignoring them, forgetting to feed them while my friend was away, etc. So her coming back for the cats was clearly all about the fact that my friend was suddenly engaged to someone else. When they went to court, the judge immediately threw out the $500,000 demand because it was ridiculous. Unfortunately, they were awarded joint custody of the cats, which was this woman's way of staying in my friend's life. So he decided it was better if he just gave her the cats so he could be free of her. Story 17. I did insurance defense for a long time, including insurance fraud investigations for insurance companies. You wouldn't believe how many people take a video inventory of their house only to have it mysteriously burned down the next day. You really can't fix stupid. Story 18. I'm a prosecutor, so I don't get hired to represent anyone. I work for the government. But I do have discretion over how the prosecution progresses. That is deciding to proceed, deciding what to offer in the event of a plea bargain, deciding to withdraw the charges, etc. I had a case a few months ago where a man was charged with shoplifting. Turned out he was 70 years old, had absolutely no criminal record, and had shoplifted a sandwich, which he ate politely in the store. He honestly thought he had paid for it. I was so angry that he was ever charged in the first place. When I saw him in court, he was absolutely terrified. I withdrew the charges and wished him well. I have no idea how it progressed that far. Story 19. Let me preface this. I had heard about the guy I'm going to mention below before I had actually met him. I thought this was an urban legend until he came into my office one day. A guy in his late 50s, early 60s comes into the lobby area of my office and starts a commotion that freaks out the receptionist. I was the closest attorney to the lobby, so I go out and talk to the guy. He was clearly mentally disturbed and presented the following story. Someone had implanted a device in his brain that was controlling his behavior. He believed it was being controlled by Baskin-Robbins and a former mayor of Detroit. He believed they were forcing him to do random things like going to bars to drink, taking the wrong turn when driving, forcing him to retire from his job, and a lot of very other intricate things. After asking him if he had seen any doctors regarding the implant, he got really upset and said that he thought the doctors were in on it as well. After telling him I couldn't help him and suggesting that he find some new doctors, he asked me if I knew any lawyers who specialized in his kind of case. I often wonder if the lawyer I referred him to was able to help him. Story 20. I had a client come in saying that he needed to sue Stu for robbing all his checks. When I asked him if Stu had a last name, he said no. When I asked him if he knew any Stu, he said no. When I asked him what proof he had that Stu was robbing him, he showed me all of his pay stubs. There were clear monthly deductions by SCU. As soon as I saw it, I knew. I asked, "Do you have children?" He said yes. I then told him, "Your asterisk, Stu asterisk is the SCU, the support collection unit. They take money out of your check to pay for your child." He left the office asterisk, insisting asterisk that we needed to find Stu. Story 21. Guy was arrested for marijuana possession. Arresting officer never actually opened the tinfoil bundle involved and checked that it was, in fact, not a burrito. Edit. Judge tossed the case. It was a misdemeanor. They don't go CSI and reach back to any collected evidence, just roll their eyes and let everyone go home in situations like this. Story 22. One prospective client wanted me to sue Burger King for no longer serving pancakes. Edit. Thank you for all your concern and tips. This was about 18 years ago, so I hope my client found a lawyer, and you are all the beneficiaries of his foresight and proper sense of outrage. Story 23. I'm in immigration, so most of my stupid cases involve people trying to con the system or forgot to tell us martyrial information. One lady stood out, though. She was referred to us as a pro bono case. She was filing for asylum based on the fact that she's a Chinese national and she's also a devotee Christian. If she was sent back, she would be persecuted based on religious reasons. So nothing weird up to this point. She provided me with statements about how she and her family were harassed by the local police and how certain members of her congregation were arrested. So I'm looking at the statements and the names and places sound familiar. Sure enough, a quick Googling showed this was one of the bot stories. Essentially, what happens is there are people on the internet that sells these packages of fake documents and stories for a successful asylum case. From what I've heard, it usually is a real case that was successful, and someone got a hold of the supporting documents and started mass producing them and selling them. I'm guessing you're supposed to change the names from the original, but this lady didn't. Another red flag was the fact that in her supporting documents, the witnesses kept referring to her in the male form. At first, I thought the English translation had typos, but yeah, same thing in the original Chinese ones. I always thought it was more of an urban legend amongst immigration lawyers. Needless to say, I did not take her case. Story 24. When I was a federal prosecutor, an NCIS agent wanted me to prosecute federally someone living near the base for flying the US flag the wrong way. I didn't. He was miffed. Story 25. I have a friend who's a lawyer. One time, he worked a custody battle for a man following his divorce. The primary argument was that his ex-wife was a massive and would negatively impact the development of the children. The evidence consisted of statements from coworkers, Facebook arguments, and a list of HOA complaints she filed for frivolous things. He said it was a legitimate case, but everything about it was so petty and stupid. The guy won. Story 26. Probably too late here, but I was a civil rights investigator. We had one guy complain that he was fired from his factory job because of his race. He was black. Owner of the factory said it was because the guy was smoking crack on his lunch break. Turns out he was smoking crack on his lunch break, but so were a few of his white coworkers, and they were not fired. The owner agreed to pay the guy 6 months of back pay and give him a neutral reference. Story 27. When I was in law school, I did the criminal defense clinic where we help a public defender. I say help because they just give you small cases to do by yourself. I had a guy accused of shoplifting a yellow FUBU shirt. Guess what he wore to the trial? A GD yellow FUBU shirt. I asked the prosecutor to reoffer the plea deal, she did, and I convinced the guy to take community service and probation, if I remember correctly. Our public defender system is tragically overworked and underfunded. Story 28. I've been a lawyer for 9 years, and the best case so far was this elderly fellow was kicked out of a library for making an obscene gesture to every black librarian he saw. He tried to sue the library, and I was his legal consultant. Didn't take the case, but I advised him that he would get a better outcome by avoiding libraries altogether and not trying to sue the only PPL who will crush him in court bar none. Edit. Fixed a few words that I mistyped. Story 29. I had a teacher that worked for a major video game publisher, one of the top 10 ones. He told me that when people tried to sue them for small amounts due to some game being bad, they would just pay whatever the person wanted. It was cheaper than dealing with the country's terrible justice system. Except one day a guy sued them because a game was bad. He was a law student, self-representing, and tried to throw the book at the company. They decided to make an exception for this guy. They instead threw the book back at him. The lawsuit kept escalating until both sides wasted lots of time and money. Then as final stroke, they offered to settle in front of a judge. There in front of the judge, they put the price of the game on the table in cash and told the guy to just take it and stop bothering them. The judge thought it was very fair and told the guy that if he refused that settlement, he would be fined. Guy was very unhappy. He expensed like 5,000 USD in bureaucracy and airplane fares to get 60 USD. Story 30. I worked as a receptionist at a small personal injury firm and was the first line of defense against the more outlandish cases. One of the most ridiculous calls I took involved a woman wanting to sue her cat's veterinarian for malpractice because her cat scratched her, which in turn supposedly caused her liver to fail, and a slew of other health problems to arise. She believed the vet was at fault because she was convinced the cat was carrying some obscure disease, and the vet had failed to catch it. It was my second day on the job, so I put her through to an attorney, not yet knowing what else to do with such a ridiculous situation. She got a firm, "Sorry, can't help you," from our office, in part because we did not do malpractice, veterinary, or otherwise, but also because she sounded like a one-way ticket to Crazy Town. Edit. As some have pointed out, the woman may have actually had cat scratch fever, which could in theory lead to a legitimate claim. However, when she called, she presented it as, "I got sick and then someone told me it was from my cat. My vet never told me my cat was sick. Can I sue him for malpractice?" And apparently, vets do not regularly test for cat scratch fever unless you bring your cat in for certain symptoms. This was clearly an "I see a chance for a cash payout" situation, and we would get calls like that all the time with both bizarre and banal stories behind them. Either way, she would have needed someone more specialized than the firm I worked for, which primarily handled car accidents and zero cats. Story 31. Kinda stupid. Guy arrested for taking photos of women at the pool, wanted to sue on First Amendment grounds, had an associate working on it. We never filed. Story 32. Not a lawyer. But I refused a second date with a woman after she told me, "You can't break up with me without my permission. I have power of attorney." I confused her to no end when I responded, "For who?" "No, I've never heard from her again." Story 33. Not a lawyer, but lawyer friend and neighbor told me yesterday of a guy whose client is being sued, trying to turn this into a class action suit to boot, over chicken wings. The claim is that the 10 wings in his order actually constitute only 5 wings because there's 2 edible parts to a chicken wing. In chicken anatomy class, this would be true. In restaurant chicken wing business, not so. Edit. I live in Florida, so. Story 34. Worked as IT for a family law firm. One day a lady comes in asking to have an attorney look at her divorce. She goes in with the lawyer and tells him she wants the divorce on the grounds that he was beating her. The attorney explained that he would be willing to do it, but advised that because the marriage was so short, just a few months, the easiest way to get a divorce and get away from her abuser was just to file a no-fault and get it over with. She starts yelling, throwing things at, and hitting him. Mind you, he is an older guy in his late 60s at this point, telling him that if she could get 4 other divorces from him, then she could do it a 5th. She had married and divorced the same guy 4 times before this. The firm didn't take the case, but our sister firm, what we called the firm our firm split off of, did take on the guy's case. Turns out she had actually been the abusive one, basically holding him and their kids hostage with threats of telling the police he was molesting the kids and beating her. Story 35. Sometimes you have no choice but to take it. I represented a guy who sold and leased cars. A woman worked for a company that let her drive a company van to work as part of a carpool effort. She'd keep the van at home and picked up fellow workers to go to work, then bring them back to their homes. One day going to work, she was stopped at a stoplight. Some guy didn't stop in time and bumped into the van. She got out to look. She and the other guy agreed no damage, so each went on her way. Later, a woman who as a passenger discovered she was injured, went to a lawyer. The lawyer sued the company, the driver, and every passenger in the van. The lawyer deposed each passenger, got the name of their auto insurance company, sent a demand letter for coverage. One of the passengers said, "I don't have a car, but my sister does." So they sued the sister. She said, "I don't have insurance because I leased the car, and they provide insurance." So the lawyer sued my client and sent a demand letter for insurance coverage. Story 36. The poor pregnant woman hit by on-duty cop case. Worked in an auto insurance defense firm in, you guessed it, Florida, about a decade ago, representing a despicable insurance company against despicable chiropractors in PIP cases. Personal injury protection. Like the least, most basic insurance you need to legally get your car tabs renewed in FL. It's a shit show. $10K max coverage. Ambulance chasers get folks to go to the chiro they recommend. Chiro runs up $9,999 of treatment, says, "Congrats, you're cured." Clients enjoy free massages, can't fault them. But this is between the Chiros and the insurance company. Chiro submits bills. Insurance co. balks. Chiro sues. There's thousands of these cases out there at any given time. By statute, if they recovered any money, Chiros get attorney's fees. So plaintiffs' attorneys love this. Insurance company calls in the records, does a medical check, brings in dueling expert witnesses, etc., drops bills by a couple grand. At the cost of a couple grand, Chiros get paid and free attorney payments. And the whole time they wait through this, they get 11% interest on the bill. That's right, these things are like 11% interest bonds. Chiros make money. Plaintiff and defense addis make money. Medical experts make tons of money doing basically nothing. Insurance company just passes the cost on to you. The whole thing is stupid. But if you want experience doing lots and lots of civil litigation defense, well, as a young attorney, anyhow, sometimes the insurance co. would want to go to trial to try and prove a point or create precedent in their favor, or just hassle opposing counsel. Blow $40, 000 plus fighting a bill that should be settled to $3.6K. One such case was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Insured was a poor young woman of color. Driving in a slummier suburb, she pulled up to a 4-way stop. At the stop, she was rear-ended in a low-speed collision by an on-duty police officer in his patrol car. Insured. Asterisk is 9 months pregnant. Asterisk cop rightly checks on her and calls an ambulance. She hit the steering column, so they go to the hospital to make sure she and the baby are okay, and they are, fortunately. Gives birth later on, no prob. Kid and mom are fine. But she goes to a chiro after the accident and runs up the usual $10K. Company wants us to go to trial on this one, under the argument of she wasn't hurt in the accident, she just wanted post-childbirth massages. We are flabbergasted. So you want us A, to subpoena this poor, literally single mother, put her on the stand, and somehow get her to say that she wasn't hurt, she just had woman pains, and B, subpoena the police officer who hit her and get him to say that taking her to the hospital to check up on her, being 9 months pregnant, was an unnecessary overreaction due to the low speed of the accident? A cop? Covering his? Do you have any idea what will look like to the jury? After like a week of this, they finally agreed to settle. I quit shortly thereafter. Now I own a brewery because being a lawyer sucks. Edit. A word. Brewery is doing fine, thanks. Make beer, sell beer, make more beer. Edit 2. Wow, lots of people want to know about beer. Who'd have thought? So I'll make a comment below, ask questions, and I'll try to get to them, bearing in mind that soon enough, I have to go to work and, make beer happen. Story 37. A famous rapper raped her and made her prostitute. Initially, I was excited about the prospects. I wanted photo proof she knew him. She gave me a number to someone who saw them together. He had seen her, and together. This rapper went by the same name and lived in a small town. She gave me her FBPW so I could read their texts. She was sending graphic nudes to an attractive woman who was responding in shock. Her response was to send more graphic nudes. To file the claim, I wanted a letter from her psychiatrist. As of today, no letter is forthcoming. I have another crazy story. Story 38. My mother said that at a law firm she used to work at many years ago, they had received a call from a gentleman that wanted to file a lawsuit against Walt Disney. When asked why he was filing suit, he claimed that the Disney characters were coming out of the TV and stealing food from his refrigerator. They told him they'd take the case for an advance fee of $100K and never heard back from him. Story 39. I used to be a forensic social worker at a public defense organization. That is the people who provide lawyers for poor people when they get charged with crimes. You would not believe how many people believed that filing a police brutality lawsuit would result in their criminal charges going away. I mean, yes, police brutality is real, but you totally still committed a crime. Story 40. Not a lawyer, but worked for a large national insurer who dealt with frivolous lawsuits frequently. Idiot is visiting friends in the country and gets drunk, decides to wander across the street to the driveway of a farm. Ignores the multiple signs that say no trespassing and beware dog in both English and Spanish. Gets to the end of the driveway, and there's a large dog chained to a post in the front yard barking its head off at him. Farmer comes out and tells the idiot to stay away from the dog. Idiot says something to the effect that he's good with dogs and tries to pet the dog. Dog takes off his finger and the idiot drops his beer bottle as he runs back the way he came. Owner tries to save the finger for reattachment, but the guy disappears, and so the farmer turns everything over to the police. Shortly thereafter, we denied the idiot's claim and he lawyers up. Every time he lawyered up, we'd send the documents to the lawyer. Lawyer would review and then drop the case. Happened multiple times. Idiot insisted we needed to pay for his emotional trauma. SMH. Story 41. I had a teacher who had to take on a case where she was defending an entertainment district, and after someone was murdered after getting robbed near there, she had to make the argument that it was partially her fault for parking in that poorly lit of an area. Edit. As for the argument that was made, I don't really remember if this was the argument or if she didn't exercise due caution by going there by herself in that bad of an area. Regardless, my teacher felt awful about the argument she made, and the jury did not buy it because they were understandably very sympathetic to the family suing the entertainment district. Story 42. A master's student was repeatedly attacked by his neighbors. Dog, pit bull. The third time it attacked him, he had to get 6 stitches. He called the cops and they told him to call animal control. He called animal control and they told him they could only hold the dog for 12 days, then they have to give it back. So, the 4th time it attacked him, he broke its teeth and ribs, then dragged the dog to the neighbor's house, opened the door, and threw it inside. Very stupid on his part. When the cops arrived, the dog's owner and her roommate accused him of attacking the dog for some stupid reason. He spent 1 night in jail for criminal mischief, a Class C misdemeanor. Since he had police reports, animal control reports, pictures of his injuries, and hospital bills, his case was strong and we decided to take it. However, the new DA, in an attempt to further her career, tried to bump his case up to a felony. The judge threw the case out immediately and gave the guy an expunction edit. These attacks happened over the span of several months. The guy just wanted to forgive and forget until he had to get stitches. He broke the dog's teeth and ribs with his bare fists. Edit 2. The felony was for breaking and entering. Story 43. Guy came in and had a company build a shed on some land. On the phone, he told me it was built incorrectly. He insisted on meeting. When he got to my office, I asked him what was wrong with the building. Was it structurally deficient, dangerous, etc.? None of the above. Turns out it was not perfectly square with the road in front of it. It was off by a foot. You could not tell by the naked eye, but he would always know, and it bugged him. I told him that without any real damages, he had no case. He stormed out angrily. Story 44. When I was a summer associate, I worked on a case where a lady was suing her apartment complex because she walked out of her unit, slipped on duck, and injured herself. We repped the apt complex. The associate I was working for told me to slip as many based puns into the motions pleadings as possible. I happily obliged. Story 45. I defended a guy who was charged with theft for stealing some crowbars. The crowbars were found in the back of his pickup truck. At the trial, the victim of the theft and 2 of his buddies came in and testified that the crowbars, which had been taken into evidence and properly labeled for the trial, definitely belonged to the victim, and the buddies remembered seeing the victim use them. Then my client and his brother and his girlfriend testified that the crowbars were definitely my clients. They had all been using them together earlier in the day. That was pretty much it. The jury found my client not guilty, and one juror later wrote a letter to the judge saying that she was a high school civics teacher, and she believed jury duty was very important, and that the trial was the stupidest waste of time she had ever endured.